Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of History After Hours. My name is Kevin Pumphrey, and with me, like usual, is Mr. Ron Franklin and Mr. Jeremy Nixon. We are three history teachers at Lakeside High School in Hot Springs, Arkansas. This podcast episode was recorded on April 26th, 2021, and it is our first podcast ever in our 6-year history of doing one outside. So we had the students outside spread out on picnic tables basically in front of the school. We had the jazz band perform for about 30 minutes prior to, and then the students asked questions and we responded like we usually do, just improv and made up some answers. So they had some great questions. We had a really fun time. Thanks everyone for coming out. And with that said, I hope you enjoy the podcast. Okay, we are live in front of students at Lakeside High School in beautiful Hot Springs, Arkansas.
In the middle of a construction zone, which is, a certain amount of ambiance we haven't had before.
So we've recorded in France and in Italy, and we've never recorded outside of all those places, I don't think.
No, I don't guess we have.
This is our first outdoors podcast. So we've got some students that are going to drive this thing and ask us some questions. So please state your name clearly for the record, and then state your question. First up.
Hi, I'm Caleb Rubleski. What is one topic that always blows your mind when you think about it?
Quantum mechanics.
One topic that always blows your mind when you think about it. I learned recently that the Tsar bomb that the Russians ignited in 1961 out in the plains of Siberia, being the largest explosion that mankind has ever created, shook the planet, which I already knew. Every seismic monitor on the planet registered that event. What I didn't know was that bomb was at half capacity when they lit it off. Like, they actually cut the size of it in half because they couldn't fit it in the plane that they were going to drop it from. That is staggering to me, to the idea that they thought, when they actually lit the bomb itself, that they had cracked the crust of the earth just with that bomb. Now, doubled the size of that? Like, I don't know what would have really happened. That is staggering to me that we have that kind of technological advancement. And I'm not even sure you can call it an advancement at that point, right? Are we an advanced species now that we have the ability to destroy ourselves? I mean, bravo.
I think anything that deals with infinity or thinking deeply about how big the universe is.
Oh, you had to go there.
Or that kind of thing. I always find that my intuition fails me when we get up into large numbers. We can say billions and trillions and whatever. There's 20 billion Earth-like planets in our galaxy or something. I can't compute that. So stuff like that.
Oh, see, I was going to say, how is Taylor Swift a thing? She's horrible. No, I'm serious. Awful. Horrible.
I met an audio engineer from Nashville who helped her out at the beginning of her career. And he was even kind of like, you're going to make this girl a star? She can't really sing. She's not a talented musician, but the package they created, but she had some songs, obviously, but the way they did it, her managing was spot on. Now, I'm not saying she's not talented like this guy.
No, Taylor Swift can't sing?
That's where we go back in time and we stop that.
When you put Taylor Swift up with some of these other crazy belters of the same time, whoever, Kelly Clarkson or something, I mean, like, she can't sing like that.
Kelly Clarkson?
Yeah.
Yeah, Kelly Clarkson.
Is she still a person?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, good job. Good for her.
I mean, am I saying something that's controversial? Taylor Swift, like, she can't just get on stage and belt notes like Carrie Underwood or
I love that
Mariah
did this.
Carey. I mean, I'm dating myself now. I mean, she's more of a softer, her range. Okay, never mind. Maybe I'm just old. I don't know.
You're getting some hate stares right
I know.
now.
Oh, yeah, I know.
She's
That's why I
the
did
best. I know she came out with a new album. I love her new album. I'm fine with all that.
You're going to get hate mail. What's up?
I'm not saying.
Back on the thing with the
I like her.
infinity in the universe. I had a conversation one time. This is something brilliant that my son said, because we were talking about the expanse of the universe, and the known universe is expanding into more space, which seems ungodly, but I can't get my head really wrapped around that. And we were having the conversation about, are there aliens? Should we count that up? Statistically speaking, there probably is something out there besides us. How arrogant for us to think that we're the only things. But he said something. He was only like 12 at the time when he said this. When I found this fantastic, he said, if we are the only things, if we are the only conscious beings in the universe, like, doesn't that lessen your view of God's supremacy? I mean, what a waste of space if we're it.
This is Fermi's paradox.
Yeah. I'm like, well, that's an interesting argument there, boy. But, it is something to ponder, though. Why would there be all that space and we're the only things in it? Like, we're this speck of dust and the only thing that matters in the whole universe is us? That just seems trite, honestly. It seems like, why, if you believe in God, I'm not even going to push the idea that you do, but if you do, why would God limit himself in that way? You created the vastness of the universe, but you didn't do anything more than create us. We're pretty lame when it comes right down to species, ultimately, I think. We're the best and worst things that have ever happened to this planet, but we're really insignificant when you look at the magnitude of space itself.
Well, I will say this. Let me throw some fear at you, because I completely agree that
I really thought that would rouse some people up when I questioned God's abilities, but nobody flinched.
Oh, God,
What's that say about
Taylor
y'all? You were like,
Swift.
yeah, okay, I get it. Yeah, sure. God's lame.
They're still mad over the Taylor
God
Swift.
and Taylor Swift are not what we thought they were, apparently.
Here, well, let me tell you something that'll cheer you up. So the pandemic has got people thinking. I listened to this guy, a scientist, talk about this. And you know how sometimes we have horrible lone gunmen that do some horrible things, like the Vegas shooter or whatever? It's just one single person. Most horrible shootings are done by one loner. It's not a group, really. That most terrorist acts are done by one single human. What this gain function research with playing with viruses and stuff can make viruses a lot worse. We should expect at some point another pandemic, of course. And what's scary is to think about is as this scientific knowledge goes even in the high schools where they'll be teaching some of this in biology, the Venn diagram of the circle of people that know how to make viruses and spread them and the crazy people that might want to do something horrible with that knowledge, eventually that's going to overlap.
Oh,
and that is a
Lord.
horrible thought to think that one person might have the technology in 50 years to destroy humanity by releasing a crazy virus because they don't like their parents.
Good luck, young people.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
This is not an uplifting podcast so far. I don't know what's happening.
That's
We're outside in
inevitable,
the sunshine. This should feel better.
This is the case, though, for stopping all of that research on gain-of-function viruses, playing with viruses.
Why do they still have smallpox virus in laboratories? Why do they keep that?
Exactly.
Just so we can weaponize that again someday? They eradicated it, and yet they didn't really eradicate it. They still have like a petri dish full of it somewhere, like, do not open till Christmas. There's something like, why do you have that?
Yeah, and a scientist brought back horsepox, not cowpox, but horsepox, just to show it can be done. A dead, extinct virus can come back in a lab. And that's why I don't know why we do that to ourselves.
If they're going to bring back that, bring back cool stuff. Like, I want to see a woolly mammoth,
Are you advocating for Jurassic Park?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm not even going to hesitate to say yes.
There's like 7 movies that say that's a bad idea, but all right.
It's a better way to go out.
Hollywood, Schmollywood, they don't know anything. Bring back the
T-Rex
dinosaurs.
grabs you. That's better than slowly being...
Tell me you wouldn't visit Jurassic Park.
Oh, I would.
All right, so there.
But it would be on the day that they all escaped and I'd die.
Just don't hide in the portable toilet. And
Oh, that is how the lawyer died in the first one. Yeah.
So, see?
There you go. That's how I'm going to go.
All right, next question.
What was the original question?
I have no idea. Something what you think blows your mind.
Okay, make sure you turn that one on. Yeah, push it forward. There you go.
Hello there. My name is Connor Johnson, and I'm wondering if you guys have ever had a near-death experience, or maybe the closest thing you've been to death.
Have we ever had that question?
No.
That's a great question. After all these years of podcasting, no one's asked us, have you ever nearly died?
Isn't all of life a near-death experience?
Oh, here we go.
Oh, there we go. You die a little every day.
What is life?
I'm just a bundle of cells seeking affirmation.
Technically, we start dying at 25. Okay, sorry.
Oh, God.
Kind of true, but moving on.
I'm 52. That sucks.
Oh, yeah.
No, I'm kidding. No, I feel better today than I did when I was 25. So take that quarter century, people. No, I don't know. Have you ever had that? Take that question seriously. You ever had a near-death thing or any kind of supernatural experience? Just go beyond that.
Well, I was on here's, let me show you how bright I was when I was younger. I was on a four-wheeler because I grew up on a farm, and, we had four-wheelers everywhere. And I thought it would be...
Aren't you fancy? We only had three-wheelers.
Oh, we had those too, and
Brag.
my brother kept breaking his collarbone. So they sprang for a four-wheeler.
Those things flip easily.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think they make three-wheelers anymore, and that's the reason why. Yeah. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
I had my hands full, and I had to go back to the barn. Long story, but I had this extension cable, and I thought and I just put it hanging around my neck, and floored it. Little did I know the end of it was dangling here, and eventually the tire caught it, and it. Now I wasn't going that fast, and it knocked me off, and I had a little rash around my neck, but it dawned on me very quickly that that could have been it right there. If it had hit me a certain way and broke my neck, that would have been, and just from not thinking, I don't have anywhere to put it. Yeah, so I guess that's as close.
That was pretty dumb.
Yeah.
Glad you're here, but that was dumb.
I agree.
Yeah. All right, so what's the dumbest thing you've ever done?
One time I had a four-wheeler.
It doesn't even have to be near death, but just like what's the dumbest thing that you did as a kid doing something dangerous that ended up going, oh crap, I should not have done that.
I don't know that I've had any.
He applied for law school one time.
That was a dumb thing.
How much money did he spend?
That was a dumb thing. True. No, I guess the closest near-death experience I've had was my first car wreck. So let's talk about the subsequent ones. No, but flipped the car about 3 or 4 times down a hill. This is, of course, before cell phones.
All right, so you got to back up and tell that whole story. What was going on? Rain? Was it rain? Did you hydroplane?
No,
You're just a terrible driver.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's sad. Ultimately, no. I had a tie rod in the back tire. Anyway, so down the embankment, before, like I said, cell phones. I don't know which is closer to death, the actual wreck or the guy who picked me up that then said, I can't be around cops. So you can kind of weigh that out. I don't know. I was never here. He really did.
I'll just stay
he
upside down
dropped
in
me
the
and
vehicle.
ran.
Wow.
But yeah, before cell phones, he had to take me to the nearest payphone. Yeah, so when the paramedics did get there after who might have been a serial killer dropped me off, they came up, I'm like sitting on the side of the road. They're like, who is in the car? I'm like, yeah, that was me. And they're like, no, who was in the car? I'm like, no, it was me. And they're like, oh, and then they put me in traction. like to the board, like down, not moving because it was so bad. And I was just like, I'm cool. But yeah, I guess
were you though? Or were you okay?
No, I was okay.
Okay, but just out of precaution,
yeah.
Like you didn't have like.
Well,
parts
the
sticking out that
paramedic
weren't
was like,
supposed to be
you
sticking out
shouldn't
or
have
anything?
walked out of that, and I'm like, oh, I had to walk to the liquor store if that man didn't pick me up. So I don't know which was closer to death, but that's it.
All right. So weirdly enough, my story involves a three-wheeler. My folks never really did hunt much, but my dad liked to go to deer camp because he liked to drink. So I went out there with him one day just to hang out, and there were some guys there who had a three-wheeler, and I'm like, cool, I want to ride your three-wheeler. And they go, take off, boy. And I was like 17 or something. I'm like, cool. So off I go, and I didn't really know what I was doing first time on it, but I'm like, this does this and that, right, go. So here we go, off in the woods, just trailing along. And I was going really, 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 really too fast for what those were designed to do. And it was really fun until I came across a curve that I wasn't prepared for. And I tried to brake. That wasn't effective. I tried to lean real hard. That wasn't effective. As I'm going to the curve, the whole thing starts to tip up, and I saw my life flash before my eyes. All 17 years, but it wasn't long, And then I just kind of closed my eyes and hoped for the best. And when I woke up, I had bounced about 30 feet into the woods. The headlight was gone. The handlebars were bent, and my head was against a rock. But I walked away without a scratch, and I'm like, okay, so that story, when my son said, I question God's abilities, I'm like, no, I think that I was really protected by something higher than some higher power at that moment, because I should not have walked away from that. I should have limped away from that at the very least, So that seemed miraculous at that time.
By the way, just sitting here, I've nearly got killed by a horse. I nearly got killed by a bull. I fell through the roof of a hay barn, and I nearly got electrocuted in the tank where we keep our milk. I forgot about all those things.
Why were you in the tank?
None of those were my fault.
Are you swimming in milk? What are you doing?
No, we had...
You were in the milk tank.
No,
As you do.
we had this huge
Oh,
tank, and near it we have a vat of hot water, and we're sanitizing the pops and stuff. And I had my hand in the water, and I've just leaned up against the tank, and zzz, and it's simply because we had some really bad wiring, and the barn was 40 years old. And
how'd you get loose? Did you just knock yourself loose? Or
Yeah,
was it just
I didn't-
jolted you
yeah, I
away?
wasn't hanging on to
Oh,
anything.
I thought maybe
but
you were grounded to it.
I took a joke, but I'm okay. So yeah, that was I could probably think of a few more now that I come to mention it. But no, it's good enough.
I've had my share of four-wheeler wrecks too, because I grew up on a farm, but none that were that bad.
Those are all just bad ideas, really. I've not really. No, I guess come to think of it, I haven't been on one since. That makes sense, right? Yeah, I wasn't good at it apparently. Like, don't go 80 around a curve that's especially on dirt. You know.
All right,
Lessons learned.
Next question.
Didn't we have a bike wreck story one year? Didn't we tell bike wrecks? I don't think you were here then, Nixon. Did you ever have a bike wreck story, a cool bike wreck? Everybody our age has a bike wreck story.
It wasn't a cool story.
Well, I mean,
just
looking
going
back
down
on
a
it,
big
was it-
hill really fast and gravel, bad.
Yeah.
I think that was just everybody. Like
everyone's
half of
story.
this tooth is fake. I got a bad scar on my upper lip from a bike wreck.
Yeah.
I did fall when I was a kid on the barrel of a toy gun, which was metal, back in the day when,
Yeah.
and it knocked one front tooth forward and the other backward, which I still don't understand.
It twisted his
It did.
One-
So that was fun.
Yeah, if you were our age, if you were a little kid in my day, like if you had a bike and a board and a brick, like you were fixing to be a superhero, man. You're fixing to jump things. Hey, all your friends lay down in a row. Everybody lay down. We're going to jump over you with our bikes. Horrible idea.
Dr. Spock's
Really?
parenting book hadn't really made it to the South when we were growing up, so it was a little more dangerous back in the
Honestly,
day.
you guys have. I've heard kids over and over again talk about helicopter parents and nobody. We never have any privacy. We're always, they're always watching us. They're always hovering, want to know where we are. I can't turn off my location device, or they're like on us instantly. My parents didn't give a crap where we were most of the time. That is no lie. My mom taught school. She was home in the summer. She would lock us out of the house. We'd eat breakfast, and then it was like, get out. I don't want to see you till lunch. And then after that, it was like, I don't want to see you till the streetlights come on. And, good luck. That was pretty much. So we just spent our time doing weird stuff like that. Just, what do we want to do today? I don't know. Something dangerous, I guess. See if you can jump from that tree to the house.
I bet you won't touch that snake.
I bet you won't touch that.
A lot of that going on, too.
I bet you won't. Yeah, okay, yeah.
All right.
Just little redneck kids out on the farm, man.
All right. Hi, I'm Zeta Guzmanacha, and there's a lot of seniors here, including myself, so I was wondering if you have any advice for us.
Yes. What would be the first thing on that list? I know you always go with don't rack up a lot of debt. Usually seems like we've had that question a little bit before.
Don't go blindly into debt. That would be, that keeps you free, so.
Be self-aware, but also be aware enough to know that you can change directions if you need to. I think some people get locked into a system. They get locked into what their parents want them to do or what their friends are doing. Like, feel free to follow those paths if that's what works for you. But also, if you get in the middle of something and you realize this is not for me, like, don't freaking do that. Like, don't do that to yourself, because what ends up happening, I've seen people do this, where you get stuck in a career that you hate. You're in a place that you don't like. You never. It's like, how did I end up here? 30 years later, you end up where you're like, I don't know. But even at that point, even if you find yourself, like you went down the path and you really thought that was going to be what you wanted to do, but then you get down there and 10 years into that, you go, this is not what I want to do anymore. Like, give yourself the freedom to explore other options. You don't have to stick with something that really sucks in your life. Just get away from. Same thing with people, by the way. Like, if the people that you're with are no longer beneficial in your life, like I had to learn that the hard way. Like, sometimes you got to cut people loose. And that isn't always easy, especially if you've been around those folks for a long time. But sometimes you got to walk away from. Sometimes that's family too. I mean, I think that's one of the biggest pieces of advice I'd have is to give yourself the benefit of the doubt. Don't go down dark paths automatically just for something to do. I've never been down this way. What's that going to be? No, but give yourself a break every now and then too. I think would be a nice thing to do.
Yeah, I would say if you're staying close here or staying close to home, make sure that you still experience new things and don't stay in the same area that you've always lived in. You still have to take chances. You still have to try to grow and become an adult. If you're going far away, you're already taking a risk. But make sure that you don't let homesickness bring you back home. Make sure you get out there and do what you need to do and find yourself. Because I know, as cliche as that sounds, you're not going to be the same person in college that you were in high school, and you won't be the same adult that you were in college.
You know what? That's an interesting point, because I've had people that I grew up with, and like I said, I'm in my 50s now, people that I grew up with who brag that they haven't changed since high school. And I'm like, that is not something to be bragging about. If you have the same mentality, if you're the same person, if you have the same hang-ups, if you're that person, I mean, no offense, but you guys are really a lot younger than you think you are. There's a whole lot of life to go. There's a whole lot of things to do. You'll change every few years. You're a different person. You have a different outlook. You've got different experiences. You've got new people in your life. Absorb those things and grow. Continue to grow and learn as a person. If not, like I said, if I was sitting here at 50 years old and bragging that I was the same I was in high school, like that's sad to me, realistically, because that means you stopped learning when you were 18. There are people who do that, but I think that a lot of times that's self-limited, the peak in high school thing, the peak in high school people. Don't restrict yourself in that way. I'll never change. Shut up. Like, stop bragging. That's not a thing. Okay.
Now, besides the debt thing, I just want to reiterate this. I say it all the time. Something that can suck years off your life is being in a destructive relationship. I mean, I tell my daughter, don't get married until you have to, okay? And look, you know how he just said you're going to change a lot over the next few years? That's true. And sometimes the person you're with now, they're not going to change with you. And then you need to be able to understand that. And because, what percentage of high school relationships work for the rest of their lives? They get happily married. And my sister is an example of that. She got married right after high school. She's, been with the same husband but I think it's got to be tiny, 15% or lower. So just be prepared for change, and don't push it away, and don't stay with somebody just because you want something to do. And don't lead somebody on because you just want something to do and you're afraid to be alone. I know this is stuff you should be taught in school, but you're not. So.
If you are sitting around waiting for someone to make you happy, you're going to have a long, miserable life. Like, realistically, other people can't make you happy. Like, you've got to figure out how to make yourself happy with what you've been given and the things that you want to pursue. If your ultimate goal is, if I could just have this thing, if I could just have this person in my life, if I could just have this job, if I could, like, really, you've got to be able to learn to let all those things go and be happy with yourself on your own terms. And until you do that, you're never really truly going to find happiness. I know people that chase that happiness. One more thing, one more jewel in the crown, so to speak, or one more accomplishment. Like, it's really just sort of them seeking self-approval in the end. Find a way to be happy with you. Like I said, don't sit around going, that person, you don't make me happy. Nobody makes you happy. If it can be taken from you, it's temporary. Yeah?
And there's a lot of people that want to change that one thing. There's one thing about them I don't like, but I can change them. No, you can't. And if you do it, it'll cause resentment, because there is that one hang-up. And, I've been divorced, and I've gotten remarried, and I didn't want to at all. But my favorite thing about my wife, besides a million other things, is that I can completely be myself, and that's okay. There's nothing she's asking me to change. And I do the same for her because, it just worked out that way. So, yeah. Okay. That was too serious.
Wow.
But don't be afraid to date. Keep your heart open. Because you can go, look, you can go the other way too, where you become isolated and cold and you put walls up and you never let anybody in. Well, that's no way to live. There is a balance here. There's a balance. You got to be open to new ideas. You got to be open to new people, but you also can't force stuff. So just, go with the flow, man.
All right. Next, flip that little switch so we can hear you. There we go. State your name, sir.
Hi, I'm Jack Henry Frisbee. I had a question. So, as we go on in our history studies, we're talking about the '60s up until now in our next years of history.
Right.
Do you think the U.S. is more racist now than it was in the 1960s?
There's no way that's true.
Don't think that. I do think that some of the progress that we felt that we had made has been, I don't know if it just it seemed like it was more progress than it actually was, or if it's just that we've added new people in and they haven't learned the lessons of the past. But I don't know. There's a weird combination of things that may make it seem like there's more racism. I don't know. I really think that a lot of racists from, like, say, the 40s, 50s, or whatever, like, this is going to sound weird. I think that sometimes those kind of hardcore prejudices have to die off with the generation, Like I was talking about, like Pumphrey was talking about, you can't force people to do stuff. You can't legislate people getting along with each other. You can't change a law and make somebody accept that idea. You can encourage them to open their minds and to be more tolerant, but you can't force it. And if you do, then that causes resentment, like you were talking about too. And then maybe they go in the other direction. I think a lot of racism was driven underground. Like, it wasn't. It was. I think there was a time in the 50s when you see the people, especially you guys, just recently had Arkansas history, or not too long ago. And you talk about the Little Rock 9 scenario, and you look back and you see the videos, and you see the people with the signs, and we don't want integration in the schools and that kind of stuff. It was very open racism. Yeah. I think that some of those people, when it became unfashionable, some people changed their minds, but other people, I think, just learned to be quiet about it. And maybe in the more recent events, let's say maybe with the past administration and their willingness to bring that back into the open, people felt more emboldened to speak on their prejudices. But I wouldn't say that we're more so than we were.
I kind of agree that it was more open in the 50s. I say that we're less racist, probably for several reasons, but one of which is your generation. It seems, I have a daughter, it just seems less racist for the younger generation for sure. I do think in the 80s and 90s there was a lot of secret racism. There was a lot of things done that were racist, but it wasn't as blatant, so maybe it was harder to see. But I have to believe that we're making progress on the issue.
Yeah, well, I want to think that's true. Go ahead, Nixon. I'm sorry.
I've got a few thoughts on this. First, I'd say, you're right, the de facto versus de jure. AP Gov kids know, because they've seen this recently on a test question, that we're actually more segregated now, and especially in public schools, than we have been since Brown versus Board. And a lot of that is because of how we are, or where we are living. So I do think that that's a factor. Second thing, in Arkansas history.
Hold on, let's clarify that point. Are you saying that it's not government-led segregation?
No, it's de facto of fact instead of de jure of law. So yeah, and that's, Malcolm X used to talk about the segregation in New York City was worse than the segregation in the South because of how people divide themselves up, living in certain areas and perpetuating their own communities. So I do think that can lead to increases in racist thought, especially if you're like-minded.
Well, because
in a bubble,
of the isolation
yes.
that the groups have from each other?
Yeah.
Okay.
Second thing is Arkansas history. I was talking with a former student the other night, and she learned about the Elaine race riots in college and wanted to know why we didn't talk about them.
Well, somebody in Arkansas history should have.
Well, that's what I said. And then my last thought is that it's harder to be a racist now with social media. I think they're still there. It's just harder to be one, which is a good thing.
Yeah. My conservative streak is always worried that we begin to use race where it's not needed as well. We can overuse it just as easily as we can underuse it. And there's a balance there too. And generally in American history, you see that go from one extreme to the other. Hopefully we're somewhere where we're supposed to be. All right, next.
I'm Natalie. Oh, do I have to say my last name?
It would help.
Okay, I'm Natalie Shunk. So, first off, Taylor Swift is an icon. Second off,
-2.
Second off, so I think it's pretty obvious that, a lot of people are struggling with their mental health. I think it's either like 1 in 4 or like 1 in 6 people struggle with some sort of mental illness. And so I was just wondering, in an extremely stressful environment, what specifically you guys are doing to try to help aid in helping students' mental health.
Trying to be as flexible as we can be with not only the assignments that we're giving out there, but also when we when we will allow those to be turned in. I think we've been very, that's been one of the biggest things that we've tried to do, at least, is to try to understand you have a lot of things going on in your life. You might not be able to juggle all the things that you have going on. If you were sitting in a traditional classroom, I could say, okay, we're going to do this from point A to point B, and I can govern when that happens. But the idea that people self-guiding themselves right at home, your timeline is going to be different than the timeline that other people might have or what I might expect. You might have internet issues. You might have other things that you're obligated to do. I know several students that are working. Like, there's so many more stresses than just being in a classroom. That brings its own particular set of stresses. But I think that this past year has proven to us, and I was actually talking with some of the administrators this morning about this, the idea that we have become much more aware of how stressed you guys have been in all of this, and trying to find ways that we can mitigate that. It's not always easy to know, though, especially if I don't have a contact with a person. If you've been online all year long, I'm hoping that things are going well for you, but I don't know that for a fact. Just trying to be as forgiving as we can be, and understanding when people say, I can't get this to you right now, but will you still take it? I'm like, yeah. We have to work together on this.
Yeah, I made up my mind at the very beginning of the year, because most of us thought we would be here for a couple weeks and then we'd be gone again. So I was just going to keep things go by the week and just keep the schedule exactly the same. And seniors, I know you're probably mad because the juniors haven't had one wall quiz. They don't even know what that is. I know, I'm sorry. But it's just I had to completely change, and I did that just to keep things simple and consistent, because there were so many unknowns at the first. We didn't even know if we'd be here. So, that's a big struggle. But I would encourage everyone to get outside. They were telling us at the first, don't leave your house. And that was probably a bad message, considering how good it is and healthy it is to get outside and feel the sun, get a little vitamin D. So I think it's important to, still at least socialize and get outside to some degree.
And to take people serious when they tell you that they're struggling with something. I think that there's this tendency by some, I don't want to call people out, but I think there's a tendency for some teachers to go, it's not as bad as you, or you're just using that as an excuse, or you're just milking this whole COVID thing just so you can get an extra moment or two to get this assignment. Like, if somebody tells me that they're struggling with something or they need extra time, I take that very seriously.
Yeah, I just try to listen. For whatever reason, my classroom, since I've been here, has been sort of a vent zone, a safe place. I hear it all, and I joke about that all the time. Like, I hear everything. I think I hear the majority of it, but I'm okay with that, because I think there needs to be a place where you feel like you can talk and not just talk with me, but talk with each other, and let off some steam. Not that I want everybody to just sit around and badmouth all the time, but I do think you need to, Max. I do think you need that outlet. So that's what I try to do. I try to listen, and I just try to be present.
Alrighty, good question. I think it's still on. Flip it back towards you. Yeah, towards you. Yeah.
What's your take on
get a little closer?
What's your take on police brutality and it involving children as well now?
Our take on police brutality and its effect on children. Yeah. Was there more? Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry.
Go.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm reaching the tone.
There you go. All right. Thoughts on police brutality? We're against it.
Good stance.
Yes. Let's say no to police brutality.
Oh, let's not war on drugs it.
Okay, just say no.
Just say no.
Just say no. Well, okay, so that's a complicated question, because
we are pro-police too at the same time, right?
Yeah.
We don't want a nation with no police. So there's a nuanced balance here. We are against police brutality. So unified. But also we are in a nation of laws, and I think I'd rather have that than an absolute monarch with divine power or something. So there's we got to enforce laws in order to have a society, and so that's when it gets nuanced.
I think that we can do a better job of training. I think we can do a better job of de-escalation training in particular, about non-lethal ways to subdue somebody, about calming down. Like some of the things I've seen recently where things have escalated so quickly and then somebody ends up getting shot. Like I'm like, if somebody would have just taken a breath there, just one way or the other. If there's a guy in a car and he gets stopped and he is, for whatever reason, being non-compliant, it's not a good idea, I think, from the officer's standpoint, to escalate that to the point where they start demanding and start trying to grab things. And if the guy drives off, I mean, you have the car's description, you have the license plate, like you could probably follow him. I don't know that you need to start whipping out pistols and start, it's not the Wild West, I mean, that's I know that's only a singular element of it, but I think it all starts with, training, and I think it also couple that up with true community service on the officer's part. Having never been through an officer training program, I know that. I don't know a lot of what they go through, but at the same time, I do know this, having talked with some of the officers on campus, like everywhere you go, they have a different training program at different levels. Like some of them are 6 weeks, some are 8 weeks, some are more intensive, some are more, depending on where you go. But there's no, and I don't know if that's because it's a state-by-state issue, or is it a town-by-town? Well, how does that, do you know? Like, how do they actually decide what their training is going to be like? Because I know that an officer here in Hot Springs would have a different training method and system than it would be just an hour away in Little Rock.
Yeah, ultimately the police power lies with the state under the 10th Amendment. So the states get to regulate how policing is done for the most part, with the exception of federal crimes. But here's my really big problem with it, is that police forces look paramilitary more and more. I think we've escalated to the point where, the police force looks like the armed forces.
Well, we do talk about this as a post 9/11 sort of situation when more money was pumped into the policing stations and they would get, you could get bigger equipment and heavier guns and more protective gear. I mean, we have this giant SWAT vehicle in town, which is actually kind of cool looking if you just look at it as a vehicle. Like, wow, that's big and it's impressive. But at the same time, the only thing that thing is missing is a gun turret on top. Like that is actually like a war weapon ultimately. And why do we need that in town? To serve warrants? I mean, I'm not sure why we would need something to that level.
Well, their justification is because weapons are more advanced, armor piercing, high capacity.
But don't you want to work on probabilities rather than it could happen?
Yes, but I also want to work on gun control and reform.
Well, I would assume those things have to go hand in hand. Yeah. But just focusing on the policing elements of it, I agree with you completely that there's been, again, and this is happened before you guys were born, but we do study 9/11. Like there was a tremendous amount of, we must have law and order, we must lock systems down, we have to go get the terrorists, we have to get them before they get us. I think there was an overreaction from the idea that we felt insecure in this country, and so they go, no, give the police departments whatever they want to protect the citizens. However, and we have discussed this before too, at what point do you start putting bigger and bigger weapons into local cops' hands and you have them start feeling like they are a militia, or like you said, a paramilitary force? Like that's not your job. We have a military force. I don't need my local police to be a militia or a military force. We have a military for that. We have a National Guard. We have right. Those people can be called out who do have more training with that type of weaponry, and I think that's a big part of the problem as well. I cut you off though. I'm sorry.
Oh no, that's fine. I mean, I just want more Barney Fife and less, military in the streets.
Well, I want a balance, obviously. I think, like Mr. Burrell, he is a trained mixed martial artist to some degree. He is super unique for a policeman. Every policeman should be trained in mixed martial arts, though. That would de-stress them completely because I think an average police academy, you have 2 weeks of firearm training, 1 week in the classroom, 1 week on the range, and that's it. And if they don't know how to fight hand-to-hand, then they completely are reliant on that gun or a taser or something. And look, it shouldn't be a fair fight. The cops should have more weapons than a suspect or somebody. And, if a criminal starts wrestling with the cop, we can't expect the cop, wait, let me put my gun down so we can wrestle fairly. No, he's going to use his gun. And I would expect that because what happens if the criminal overpowers him and takes his gun? There's a gun involved. But I think better training for policemen, especially in hand-to-hand combat that would de-stress them where they can actually act reasonably instead of, and look, I don't know either. I've never been a police officer. I just know the studies, and I look at some of the heightened situations where you literally lose control of your logic when you go fight or flight. And they just take a gun, So the training, I think, is huge. I also think the police could do a better job at community outreach and training in schools to get students more, because when you see a police officer, there's a level of anxiety that happens. And that's amongst people that like the cops, okay? So you can imagine the cultures that have a natural fear of policemen anyway. I think if there could be money put into police outreach into the high schools, teaching people how to be arrested, I mean, if you have a problem with someone arresting you, that's not the time to complain. You do that at the police station later after you get a badge number. But when you start resisting, that's when things usually go nuts. So teaching that and going through those motions, plus the better training. I mean, there's so much to it. I think the last thing we should do, though, is take the money from police completely. I mean, maybe in weapons, maybe in the military stuff that they don't need, but I think it should be diverted into more training, more community outreach, that kind of thing.
Well, the police also need to be not responding to things like homeless calls or drug-related offenses or in many instances where social work or help can be given rather than arrest, because we've put so much on the police, and that's what people don't understand when we're talking about, for the most part, when they say defund the police, they mean take away the funding for those things and put it back in mental health services.
Well, I think that I try to put myself in a position where I can see that from multiple angles, and I think about how if I get stopped, that cop doesn't know who I am. They don't know what I'm all about. They don't know what my intentions might be, and so there's already sort of like this apprehension, I would suppose, on how you approach somebody. And I'll give you a case in point and how quickly things can turn sour, because I was several years ago. I was going through I was doing my master's degree through Henderson. I was driving back and forth. It was late at night. I was coming in from Arkadelphia, and I was coming down this big hill, and I wasn't paying attention, just kind of thinking about being home and what I was going to do next, because it was going to be late when I got there. And I was going way too fast, and I got stopped. And because I had been in class, I had all my stuff in this sort of a satchel thing. It was over a little backpack thing in the back seat of the car. I just threw it back there when I got in the car when I left. And I get pulled over, and I was like, okay, fine. And I was a little disgruntled, because I'm like, okay, sure. I was trying to get home, and here I get stopped. So I wasn't rude, but at the same time, I'm like, kind of huffy, I suppose. And so it's late at night. He's got his flashlight out. He's like, hey, where you going? What's up? Let me see your license and all that. I'm like, okay, cool. I'm going home. Sorry, but I was going too fast. Give me the thing if you need to. He goes, I need to see your license and registration. I'm like, cool. And without thinking, I whipped around, because I knew that my stuff was in the bag in the back of the seat, but I didn't say that to him, and he didn't know what I was doing. He didn't know what I was reaching for. And instantly his attitude changed, and his gun came out, and I was like, dang, if I hadn't really been paying attention, it was that easy for me to get shot right then, because he didn't know who I was and what I was doing, or what I was reaching for I was going to spin back around with. And I realized that in the middle of that motion, because I heard him go, don't. And I'm like, oh my God, like I wasn't even thinking, I said, my stuff's in the bag. But I made sure you keep your hands. If he says keep your hands where you can see him, keep your freaking hands where you can see him, because he doesn't know what you're doing, right? I learned a very valuable lesson that night, because I didn't have anything against him, but he doesn't know me. You see what I'm saying? And so I slowly got what I needed to get in full view of what he was doing, so he could shine the light the whole time, and I got everything out, and it was fine. He gave me a warning, and off we went. But I mean, it was quick, and I had to really reflect on that afterwards, going, God bless, man. That could have gone downhill a lot quicker than I even realized, So it's just something to think about. Now, the other part of the question was about kids. I wasn't quite clear on what you meant when you said the police brutality in the kids part. Did you catch that?
13-year-old. Is that what we're talking about?
Oh, about okay, yeah. Oh, okay. Well, I'll just tell you then. The story with the 13-year-old who had the gun and he was shot by the officer, where was that? Was it Chicago? Was it? Okay. I don't know. I mean, I think that's a complicated scenario, because even though he's 13 and you go, oh, he shot a 13-year-old. Yeah, it was a 13-year-old with a gun. It takes 4 pounds of pressure to pull a trigger. And that trigger had been pulled recently. And so there's automatically an amplification of that story. And when that boy turns around, he, in the split second before he turned around, had that gun in his hand. It's visible on the body cam. Spins around. The cop doesn't know he ditched the gun. And I'm not saying that anybody's right or wrong, and I'm not advocating that the boy got shot. I'm not saying, oh, you should have blasted him away. That's not what I'm saying. But I can see how he would have made that error in judgment. That was an error in judgment. He should not have shot that boy. But in that real-time moment, see, we have the ability to stop that moment in time and analyze it and go, the boy clearly didn't have the gun in his hand. All the cop saw was motion. Just like the little story that I just told you. All he saw was me moving. Yeah? He knew that kid had a gun a moment before. Now, again, what should he have done? I don't think he should have pulled the trigger, but at the same time, I can see where he would have made that mistake in a real-time split-second action. It's unfortunate.
But this is where the training comes in.
Right.
I mean, these cops have families. They have children. They're not robots. So they're thinking about their family too, and they don't want to get shot and killed either. It's such a complicated issue, and to get all this. But I'm optimistic because, like, we lived through the 80s and then the 90s with Rodney King and all that. The difference lately is that a lot of police have stood up against their own, which you never saw before.
Right.
And that gives me more of hope that if police are willing to call out other bad police, that's a crack in the system, and I think that could lead to really good things.
During the Derek Chauvin trial, the officer that was just convicted of killing George Floyd, like his own police commander, captain, came out and testified against him in trial. He was like, and that was something that we never would have seen in the 80s or 90s. That's absolutely right. The idea that his own commander came out and said, we don't train that way, and rather than protect this bad cop, rather than protect him because the code of silence or whatever it is, like, no, like that's, so I agree. I think there's movements in the other direction now.
And I think going back to Nixon's point and your point about the paramilitary, like, a lot of that was created with the drug war and SWAT teams. I mean, good grief. That's a lot of that infrastructure was built, and it's hard to roll that back.
Well, you can see why they would want to do that, though, because in the moments after 9/11, like, we were scared to death. Like, literally, like, oh my God, like, we must have these emergency powers to hunt down terrorists and to preserve the sanctity of the United States and to save people. And we're like, hell yeah, save us. Fix things. Don't let terrorists get. I mean, but now that threat has seemingly been mitigated, or at least, I don't want to say mitigated, has been tempered.
Don't you think it was building up to that in the 90s? I mean, like HBO gang war banging in Little Rock.
Yeah.
Cops was the #1 show on TV for like 15 years.
I don't know.
People just liked that whole.
Yeah, well, but at the same time, I know that it clearly changed after 9/11, where they were like, yes, give them more weapons, give them more ability to, the no-knock warrants and all that stuff. Anyway. Cool. We got just a little bit more time. Go ahead. Nope. There you go.
Hello? All right. Hi, my name is Adrian Steelman, and this one's not that serious. If you ever had Max, what is your favorite Max quote?
This is going to be all Nixon, I think.
Yeah. Am I the only one that's taught Max?
Well, no, but it doesn't say much in my room, so.
Oh gosh. I don't know. I've got to think about it. There's so many. There's so many.
And so we go to war. No?
I don't know that it's so much that it's a quote, but I mean, my favorite moment is convincing him that the state next door that he lived to was East Dakota. I've got it. This is my favorite Max quote. Mr. Nixon, I've known you for over a year, and every day that I've known you, you've lied to me, and I believed it. And he still does every day. That's why I love Max.
Liar. Alrighty, who's next? Okay.
And Max, yeah.
Push the button towards you. There you go.
Yo, hello. All right. Look,
Yo,
that's how he comes in class, by the way. Yo, yo, yo.
Yeah, I'm Maximus Fortin, and I was wondering, we heard Mr. Nixon's hot take on Taylor Swift, and being the big brain individual that he is, he's already got the worst singer. I want to know who's the worst actor,
Oh.
Watch myself. That's tough.
What about most overrated?
Oh, well, I do have a hot take on that that's going to tick some people off. And the most overrated is Meryl Streep. There you go. Yep.
And you base that on?
Yeah, just me.
No evidence.
I just don't
None
like it.
whatsoever. It's like a world history essay.
Oh.
Sorry, that was a cheap shot.
No. I'm not a big Tom Cruise fan. Like any movie that he dies in, that's a cool movie.
I think Keanu Reeves is also not a great actor, but he has been able to find himself in some of the best movies. And it's just like, okay, because I thought he was gone after The Matrix. I thought, okay, well, and then this John Wick came out, and he's perfect for that role. I thought, okay, well, he still can't act. But
Keanu Reeves
good
is the
movies.
best Keanu Reeves actor on the planet.
That's
like
right.
he's just perfect for who he is.
I
You know, and I mean, there's something to that, right? But he's the same guy in every movie. Like, you ever notice that? It's like, he's like when he was in Dracula, you're going down, Dracula. You know, he was in Point Break. You're going down, Brody. What other movies he been in? I can't think. John Wick. You're going down, dog killer.
All right. Next question.
My name is Jacob Werfelman, and so it's kind of like a two-parter question. But first, do you think we should decriminalize more drugs, and if so, which drugs?
Did you have one in mind?
No, I'm just asking, like, if you had to make almost a tier list, which drugs should be most legal and which should be least legal?
I think the government's already done that.
Okay, so the trend to legalize cannabis across the country should be followed by fill in the blank.
Well, I mean, you got to get the federal government to legalize it first.
Well, no, I know. But ignore them for a second.
Well, we had a president that did for 4 years, but all right.
See, that was a hot take. Okay, no, I don't know. Like cocaine used to be legal. Apparently, that was fun. I'm not saying that I want any. I'm just saying that, you know, Robin Williams said that cocaine was God's way of saying, you make too much money. I mean, you know, Coca-Cola became a national brand because of it. It was a brain tonic. It'll wake you up. Alert. It will. Calm down.
Yeah, this subject's, I mean, it's difficult. There's a lot of moving parts to it. We shifted really quickly.
What are your
into
thoughts
this.
on LSD, man?
Yeah.
I don't think you'd remember them.
I mean, we went from a pretty, criminalization of all sorts of drugs to the popular mood now is to legalize. And I guess what Oregon didn't they?
Was it Oregon? Yeah, decriminalize everything, go for it, have fun. Hopefully you don't crash and burn too hard.
I think the non-violent drug offenses should be decriminalized, and I think most people agree with that. But then you get into the whole selling and distributing to children and taking across, state.
What do you
lines
think
and
about the
national-
idea?
then
This
it
was
gets
in New
kinda-
York City several years ago where they were like, okay, we're going to set up a program where we're going to teach you the safest way to use heroin. Yeah, the idea was that they were trying to stem, the idea that people were reusing needles, that they didn't know how to do what they were doing, even though they were highly addicted to that narcotic, right? But they were actually killing themselves, or they were spreading disease. It was a way to try to curb HIV, the spread of HIV/AIDS. The idea that I think it was coupled up with mandatory therapy. But they caught a lot of flack over that. How dare you teach people how to use heroin? How dare you give them fresh needles? How dare you try to save people? How dare you? So I mean, there's another side of that argument. I don't think there is a truly safe way to do heroin, but at the same time, there are really, 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 really bad ways to take it. What do you have thoughts on that?
I mean, if it is decriminalized altogether, then it has to be regulated. So that's just more government coming in, and I mean, they're, one way or the other, the government is either going to tell you can't, or they're going to come in and regulate it, and they're going to say what you can and can't do with it. I do believe it should be criminal, at least non-offensive, non-violent. But not every drug is the same for every person, and there's just so much unknown.
Was that the Reagan administration that started the war on drugs, where it was like maximum penalties, maximum sentencing for Yeah, was that right?
Yeah, and then the crime bill, 94, I think.
Yeah, Bill Clinton and the crime bill, and then George W. did the. He's trying to get the 3 felonies lifetime sentence.
Oh,
through.
three strikes.
3 strikes, you're out.
strikes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I don't know. Like the only thing I'm really addicted to is like oxygen. You know, I keep needing that in my life. Other than that, everything else can kind of come and go. Maybe some H2O. Yeah.
I don't know.
All right, got time for a few more. Let's go.
Yeah, maybe 2 more questions.
Hi, I'm Hayes Horton. Recently, Joe Biden unveiled his infrastructure. He's trying to, bring back union jobs, strengthen unions, and rebuild America's infrastructure, and get America competing in manufacturing again. Do you guys expect that this bill, as ambitious as it is going to be as successful as he wants it to be? Or do you think it's going to crash and burn? What are your thoughts?
That's a tough one. I think that there are some good things about the bill in that we're talking about moving production more towards emerging markets, green markets, things of that nature, and making an investment in renewable resources and jobs of the future. It's hard to gauge how successful a jobs plan is going to be, at least for me, because there's so many factors that are going to play into that, including other rising economies in other countries. I hope it's as successful as he says it's going to be.
Is it enough money to invest in infrastructure, or do you think they sold themselves short? I know it's a lot of money, but at the same time, is it enough?
That I honestly don't know. I do like the fact that they're rebranding what infrastructure is, that it's not just roads and bridges and things like that. It's internet connectivity, it's technology, it's the ability to connect rural parts of the country. I do think that that's all correct, and I do think that we need to expand infrastructure. The question is going to be, and I don't know how to answer it, but the question is going to be, how much is too little to invest in that? Because I get that we're at all-time deficit spending with COVID, and our national debt just keeps piling on. But I think if there is a time to do it, it's now.
Yeah, it should have happened 20 years ago, and
Yes.
it's been political. And if we don't do it now, it's got public support. I think if we're ever going to do it, now's the time. So, and then just hope for the best.
All right. Yeah, go ahead.
It's on. Okay. Hi, my name is Brennan Wilkins. I would like to quickly note that Taylor Swift was rated she was named Woman of the Decade by Billboard and Artist of the Decade
Billboard
by the
sucks.
American.
All those lemmings listening to mainstream music over and over. Oh my God.
She was named.
Brennan, don't say that out loud.
She was named Artist of the Decade by the American Music Awards. My question though
That
is,
seems like a bit of a stretch, though.
so out of these 3 people,
music.
I need you to, this is a question from Cadence Barnett, I should add. Out of young Joe Biden, young JFK, and young Bernie Sanders, who is the most and least attractive?
Most and least?
Once upon a time, a few mistakes ago.
I don't know that I've seen young pictures of all of them.
I've seen young Bernie.
Bernie's looked about the same for 40 years, except his hair is a little darker.
Yeah. Okay, there's
know
there's
JFK.
Kennedy. Yeah, right. Yeah, okay. Okay, I'm gonna go Biden. Yeah. No, I'm going Biden. I'm a Biden
I'm going
guy,
Biden.
Yeah. Huh? Yeah.
just
I
gonna
never
go
cared for
Bernie.
the Kennedys. It's personal choice. Yeah. Don't look at me like that.
All right, we got time for maybe one more?
All right.
Hi, my name is Michael, and I was just kind of wondering if, as teachers, especially history teachers from a Western point of view, I've always kind of wondered, ever since I started questioning everything over the summer, if you've ever wondered if you were maybe perpetuating some propaganda.
Oh, I'm 100% sure we are.
Probably. We're steeped in it. Yeah, probably. I don't. I mean, can you be more specific? Like, what kinds of propaganda are you talking about?
I mean,
like
we're
pro-American or pro-Western, pro-Christian, pro... Yeah, go back up. It's fine.
I was kind of thinking more specifically like pro-American propaganda, especially like white nationalist sort of stuff.
Oh, gosh.
Because I do hear like a lot of stories are often filtered through a very specific lens, especially especially during the Victorian era when everything was starting to get very whitewashed and eugenics was becoming popular and stuff like that. I was just kind of like thinking, do you ever wonder if you've ever recited any stories from that era instead of what actually happened?
It's maybe unwittingly, and I mean, all I can say is maybe. I wouldn't have purposefully have done that, but at the same time, sometimes we're regulated to teaching what we're taught, and it may be hard to walk away from that. And we do explore things. We all do research on our own, and we try to broaden our horizons. So I think that I would hope to think that I would not be just a shill for the man. You know what I'm saying? Try to broaden the horizon and tell things from different stories. And I don't think about the whitewashing because we call out if we see nonsense and we see racism and we see that you talk about eugenics specifically, we're like, no, that's like no, that we shouldn't. That should never have been a thing. Although, from a historian standpoint, the idea that you've got to you're welcome to have your own personal opinions about things, but at the same time, we want to stand outside ourselves and outside of every self then at that point and try to look at it as objectively as we can. Why did they do what they did? Why did they feel the way they felt? Not that I'm going to push that narrative one way or the other. Were they right or wrong? Were they right or wrong to have done that? That's up for debate. What is accurate is to say that it happened, and we need to be as clear as we can about those things and what motivated them and what the cause and effect elements were. Like I'm speaking for myself, obviously. But.
But I like to think that we're conscious of it too. I mean, you and I were just talking yesterday before we started. Well, you guys started the world history lesson with LGBT issues, and I was talking about the whitewashing of that history specifically. So
Right.
There are areas that we are conscious about, and I think that's one of them.
I think that we work hard to not be biased or to push a historically whitewashed narrative. I don't.
The complicated part of history is that it's complicated. It is the difference between fact and truth. We can tell you a lot of facts, but none of us, I don't think, has written a full history book. We are relying on other historians to tell us what happened and how it went down, and then we form a narrative out of that and tell the story. And we do question ourselves and try to dig deeper, but once again, where are we digging? From other historians that have done the work. So we'll never know what it was like to live a certain life or from another perspective. My quote that I say at the first of every year is, what I'm going to tell you is true from a certain perspective. But it's not the reality. It's not the ground. Like, I don't know what it'll ever be like to be in World War II or in a Jewish concentration camp. I won't know the ins and outs of that. We can look as deep as we can from every perspective, and this is why I do the Columbus thing, to try to get you to look from another perspective. And every story could be that way, every one of them. We talk a lot about pro-America stuff in my class, but you could take every issue and be the anti-American, and it wouldn't go very well. But, you could definitely do that in just about every subject area. So, yeah, that's history's complicated, but it's fun.
I think that we work hard to try to find the other side of that story so that we can give people a more well-rounded version of the events, and then let you make up your own mind about what, why, and when. Yeah. Anybody else? We got time for one more? No. Oh, you gonna come? All right, come on. All right, we'll let you wrap it up. This would be a good way to. Senior leadership. Let's go.
This is both William and
make,
I.
Make this a good one.
What is it again?
Which lesson has the most impact on students, do you think?
That y'all teach.
Yeah.
Which lesson has the most impact on students that we teach?
Do you think?
Okay.
It's never history. It's always some random story that I told in class that they remember. They won't, I guarantee you they don't remember the whatever act of tolerance or, whatever. It's usually a story that leads to something else that we'll talk about, but, Yeah, see?
Yeah. I agree with that. I think that some of the most impactful things that we would talk about go beyond the lesson to touch on a more personal level. But I would say this, thank you. But I would say this seems like for the kids that came through my sophomore class especially, like when we teach the Vietnam lesson and I show the burning monk in Saigon, like that has a tendency to stick with people. I've had students come back years later and go, "Good God, man, that was horrible." I go, "Yeah, it really was." So that's a pretty impactful story because there's so much going on that people aren't aware with. Just 1968 in general, like that was it's a hell of a year, you know. And so in Euro, I don't. Golly, there's so many. The existentialism story is pretty tight. When we talk about, who are you really? What kind of face do you put out there for people, and who are you on the inside, and does that ever come out? Like that's a big deal for you guys that want to take Euro in the future. Perhaps like we get into some really deep interpersonal stuff there. So,
for Gov, I would probably say it's maybe the sterilization of imbeciles in the eugenics movement. Probably that one. Or, the one they remember is always the 7 words you can't say on TV or radio.
Carlin rules.
I've said them enough. Oh, bong hits for Jesus. That's one they tend to remember.
What?
Well, hey, that actually leads us into something you guys wanted to talk about, because the last time the Supreme Court heard a free speech case about students was a guy who unfurled, as the Olympic torch came down the sidewalk outside of his school, a big banner that said "Bong hits for Jesus," and he got suspended, and then he got doubly suspended when he said something. He used a Thomas Jefferson quote about speech denied. But the Supreme Court is about to hear another First Amendment case about a girl who got suspended for a snap she posted.
Off campus.
Yeah. So it's pending at the Supreme Court now. She dropped a couple of F-bombs related to her cheerleading squad and some other things.
Yeah, the basic story was she had tried out for the squad, didn't make it, was really pissed, went off campus and just went on this rant against the school and against the cheerleaders and against the coaches and the administration, and really was just tearing it up. And some people screenshotted that and then sent it around and it got back to the coaches and they were like, "Oh yeah," showed the administrators and they're like, "Oh yeah," and then they suspended her. And now she's suing.
Yeah.
So we'll see where that goes. We don't know how that's going to turn
out.
Well,
what's interesting about that to me is how with COVID, the lines between what is school and what is not school is becoming blurred because of digital learning.
That was her point. I wasn't on school grounds. I wasn't directing that at any school officials directly. It was just out to my friends or whomever. And so you don't have the right to tell me what to say or do off of campus. Well, to your point, go ahead then.
Well, I'm just saying now we're doing asynchronous learning where, it's anything digital that's school related could be considered school campus. So I don't know how far that would stretch. You wouldn't think a personal Snapchat account would go there, but if it's about the school.
With the slant of the court currently, how do you think that's going to go?
Well, the court ruled against bong hits for Jesus. He wasn't protected. This is a harder one because I think you're going to see there's a weird split on the court when it comes to free speech issues, because some conservatives really take that I'm in my home, I'm on my private property, I'm in my own element thing very seriously.
But this person wasn't at home.
Well, but that's going to get to the question of whether this device is protected or not. We talk about it in AP Gov a lot about, is your information protected on your phone private? Can the school take it? Can they look through it? Because there's different what we call circuit splits, where the most conservative court in the country basically said, hey, we can take your phone and we can look through it all we want for any minor infraction.
Aren't all the arguments against that moot since Edward Snowden proved that the government is taking everything that you've ever done?
Oh, yeah, they're collecting it all anyway.
You have no privacy?
But that's what it is. It's do you have the right of privacy in school, and how much privacy do you have? And then the case where the 13-year-old was strip searched while they were looking for drugs. AP Gov is weird, but interesting. I don't know how the court's gonna rule on this one. I'm watching it pretty closely.
All right. I think.
That's it. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, when we teach Dante's Inferno, that tends to get people's attention as well. That's a twisty little story if you've never really experienced that. Torture Day. Good Lord, yes, these are y'all are bringing
yeah.
some stuff up now. Yeah, Torture Day has a way of sticking with people. Yeah, yeah.
Column Day. Y'all made that a thing. I didn't make that a thing. What's the best column?
All right, guys. Well, that is History After Hours podcast. Once again, this podcast is sponsored by Miss Taylor Swift and Billboard Magazine. So we'll see y'all later. Goodbye.